A designer who struck lightning very early in her career feels the pressure to repeat the magic. A writer who chases a story so he could pay the bills. A young boy who feels his popularity at school fading. A police officer who runs down a rabbit hole of corruption and keeps digging. A lonely woman who is haunted by her own self. Every day facing humiliation, every day inching closer to losing it. Waking up burdened, riddled with panic, people gossiping, making excuses, shifting blame, avoiding. Hope it goes away, the horror of life never does make it all go away. If you have seen Paranoia Agent, a 13 episode series created by Satoshi Kon, you might know the characters that I just listed. If you haven't, you might know of people I just described. Those who chase themselves away from their own reality, those who feel helpless and bind themselves to an escape, wanting to stay warped in a blissful, albeit made up reality. Well, maybe not to those extremes, but at the very least, convincing themselves of a false narrative that defends them from their own conscience. Satoshi Kon was a director who often explored the blurred lines between reality and illusion. World audience in general is used to seeing Japan through the medium of its pop culture, and that lens often paints pictures of hopeful determination, of idyllic slice of life, of prideful heroism, and most of all, of its kawaii kitsch. Paranoia Agent, among many other things, critiques this very culture and lays bare the effects it has had on Japan. It's a telling story of a country that succumbed to its own delusions. In this video, I will talk about one of my favorite anime shows. There are going to be mild spoilers ahead, but not enough to ruin the show for you. This video, if anything, is aimed to convince you to go and watch it. This is Paranoia Agent, or How Delusion Gave Birth to a Show. The story begins with a timid character designer Tsukiko, who is famous for creating a pink puppy called Maromi that became a rage among the public. As mentioned previously, she suffers from an artist's block and she is pressured by her company to design the next global phenomenon that takes the people by storm. As the deadline approaches nearer, Tsukiko is attacked by a street thug while going home one night. When the incident is investigated on, Tsukiko describes the attacker as a young boy on roller skates with a red cap who hit her with a cracked baseball bat.
He was short. Fifth or sixth grade, maybe.
An elementary school kid.
The story picks up steam as media spreads the news of the attacker now dubbed Il Slugger, a shonen bat, and endless rumors begin to come up. Shonen Bat claims a second victim when he attacks a gossip journalist Kawazu, who was teasing Tsukiko for a story he could sell to publishers and earn a buck. The detectives in charge of the case and the audience are gradually revealed to how all the attacks have a common thread in that Shonen Bat only attacks people who are emotionally cornered, who are on the verge of breaking down, and how each of the victims seems relieved after the attack, like a burden has been lifted.
Tsukiko Sagi, Kawazu, Yuichi Taira, Harumi Chono. To me, all of them looked somewhat relieved after they were attacked.
The central mystery of Shonen Bat's real identity and his relation with Marumi are at the core of this series, as each episode focuses on different people who are struggling with their demons and suffering are relieved by Shonen Bat. These characters include a school-going kid Yuichi, who loses his popularity amidst rumors of him being Shonen Bat, his personal tutor Harumi, who lives a mundane life but suffers from dissociative identity disorder and moonlights as a vibrant escort, and a corrupt police officer Hirokawa who indulges in robbery and child abuse among other crimes. All these characters are shown to be living isolated lives, only to be derided by their own thoughts and spiral into intense paranoia that leads to the attacker apparently being summoned to help them escape their troubles. With the series, Kon designed a society that mirrored contemporary Japan at the time it came out. Japan is one of the leading countries in the world even today when it comes to depression and suicide. Being overworked is a social symbol of loyalty and pride, and the debts resulting from being overworked are so high that it even has its own term for it, Karoshi, literally translating to overworked death, or death incurred from being overworked. We only need to look at the tragedy of the salarymen. This occupational burnout is represented by Kon in the episode 10 titled Mellow Maromi, focused on an animation studio working on the anime series based on Marumi. Animation in Japan being one of the most overworked and underpaying industries. Coupled with hikikomori, roughly translating to pulling inward or social withdrawal, being common amongst adolescents and adults in Japan, Paranoia Agent showed a culture hidden in plain sight, but seemingly out of view. It's a theme Kon plays with almost all of the characters, including Tsukiko, who lives alone and has no work friends, or one of the detectives assigned to the case, Keiichi Ikari, a relatively practical person who avoids spending time with his ailing wife after being suspended, instead drinking with new friend from work. Their inclination towards reclusion and the inability to freely talk about their problems makes them more and more vulnerable and mentally weak. This relates to a cultural issue in Japan that until the 1990s did not recognize depression, and when it did and made antidepressants available, they did not see many buyers. A tradition that looked at the honorable samurai or the kamikaze pilots as inspiration, it only took a marketing approach to label the medication as treating a cold for the soul. Let Prozac see a bump in sale. But where does this collective paranoia come from? By far the biggest symbolism that Korn draws through Paranoia Agent is the role of pop culture in media and the sentiments post World War II. After the mushroom cloud struck Hiroshima and Nagasaki, mass fear of the nuclear bomb was given a face and a name through movies and anime.
その日、人類は思い出した。奴らに支配されていた恐怖を。
Most notable of this was Godzilla. Although there was nuclear taboo that no media would outright mention the bombs or nuclear warfare, pseudo-nuclear blasts were common for mecha-based anime of the past that could wipe out entire cities. Take for example Neon Genesis Evangelion, Oya Kamehameha, or even Naruto.
神羅転生
Paranoia Agent took this overt effect and subverted it into a phenomenon that was born out of the minds of the people. As Japan shifted its image from a country damaged by war to an economic giant, pop culture fell into the public view and atoned for this fear.
Even if my real life is not that great, at least I have all these comics and fantasy stories to dive into and escape.
Most of the major characters like the corrupt cop Hirukawa or the shonen bat's copycat Kozuka deluded about pop culture. In episode 4, titled A Man's Path, Hirukawa commits horrendous crimes involving robbery and pedophilia, but views himself as an honorable man in the vein of an action hero from a manga while justifying his actions. In the same way, Kozuka in episode 5, The Holy Warrior, views his life as an RPG where he is the chosen one who is on a quest to defeat Kohoma and attacks two of the victims of the shonen bat. Kon critiques the otaku or the super fandom culture and the obsessive nature of consumerism in the country. And then enters Kawaii culture, a movement that became a prominent aspect of Japan, taking over entertainment, clothing, food, personal appearance, and many other aspects. The people who embraced Kawaii felt they had an escape from the terrors of the past or from the struggles of modernity. The biggest and the most prominent phase of Kawaii, arguably still after over 4 decades of being introduced, was Hello Kitty. Characterized by a small round face, a tiny nose, round hands with no paws, and button eyes that stared into your soul, telling you everything was fine even when it wasn't. Marumi in Paranoia Agent is a representation of this false sense of security that on first glance seems supportive but on a closer look is deeply problematic and toxic.
There. Go away! You know I'm always on your side.
Not only do Marumi's appearances in the form of toys or plushies increase with each episode, she soothes Tsukiko and other characters by actively protecting them against any criticism, effectively curbing any growth they can achieve. And that's what I thought of Paranoia Agent when I first saw it. That is a show about the collective fear of an entire nation, and how tempting it is to stop worrying and accept the delusion. The opening of Paranoia Agent is a bizarre picture that paints these characters laughing in the midst of disaster. The lyrics sure portray that feeling, that one of these days, someone like Shonen Bat will creep out and ease us. But that is not all that Paranoia Agent meant. Shonen Bat was not just symbolic of ending one's pain through harming them. All these characters, in a way or the other, were running away from an uncomfortable truth about them. All of them getting to play the victims. And that is where Paranoia Agent stops becoming great, but an absolute genius work of art. That behind the anxiety and the fear lies a disturbing and a dark past which was hidden away from the collective conscience of Japan. There are multiple documents that reveal the ruthlessness with which Imperial Japan's military operated during the war before the bombings. The war crimes included capture of Chinese lands to indiscriminate killing of the civilians. Sexual abuse and forced suicides were common, as documented in the notorious incidents of the Nanjing Massacre, a period of mass murder, theft, rape, and arson during 1937 to 38, and the infamous Battle of Okinawa, where the military rounded up civilians and ordered them to kill themselves with grenades. It was a period of true horror and perversion dealt by the military might of Japan. Estimated deaths at the hands of the troops reached numbers ranging in the millions, and atrocities even included sneak attacks in nations without even a formal declaration of war. What's disturbing is the government attitude after the war. Late historian Stephen Ambrose had been quoted as saying, "The Japanese presentation of the war to its children runs something like this. One day, for no reason we ever understood, the Americans started dropping atomic bombs on us. Academic textbooks gave embarrassingly low to zero mentions of the war crimes in an attempt to rewrite history, some reserving only 2 to 3 pages for Nanjing Massacre and Battle of Okinawa, others failing to even give a mention." For decades, the nation went through a state of denial as the government even refused to acknowledge the sufferings of comfort women, women that had been kidnapped and forced into sexual slavery by the military. This until 1993, when during the Kono statement, Yohei Kono finally issued an apology to all those irrespective of place of origin who suffered immense physical and psychological wounds. This revisionist philosophy did have its own psychological effects on the people. While there was confusion surrounding their own background, the mass guilt among the Japanese took its toll. There were many that saw the bombings as a palate cleanser, as an opportunity to get Japan out of the mess that it created over the years. What is worse than an atomic bomb, right? Susan Napier quotes, "Atomic bombs created for many a collective sense of victimhood." And it's not really hard to notice how glad the characters in Paranoia Agent are to have been attacked by Shonen Bat, to have been absolved of their guilt, even going so far as to give themselves a sense of justification, like in the case of Kawazu, who validates himself for hitting an old man with his car.
Who cares about that old fart when I'm the one suffering since I hit him?
"I'm not a suspect anymore," says Yuichi. "I'm the victim. Shonen Bat set me free." In episode 4 again, Hirukawa sticks a box of matchsticks to his head that has an image of the rising sun and cherry blossoms, essentially labeling himself Imperial Japan when asked by Ikari why people commit crime. Kon critiques this mentality of deluding oneself through imagery, as noticed in episode 11 No Entry, when Detective Ikari finds an escape from his job and ailing wife Misai, and is transported into a cartoon realm that looks somewhat similar to woodblock and scrolls of old eras, or even super flat art style that sheds away the extra beauty of modern 2D animation and is meant to critique consumerism. The opening theme, aptly titled Dreamland Obsessional Park, talks about a sunny afternoon similar to that of maybe 9th August 1945, tells us not to worry about the tsunami, and claims how beautiful the mushroom cloud in the sky appears. Although the revisionism had a deep impact on the war guilt among the Japanese, several reforms were in fact made as the decades passed with the passing of Emperor Hirohito in 1989. Episode 11 No Entry shows us the resolve of the human mind as it focuses on the story of Misai, the wife of Detective Ikari, who is suffering with an illness. Her depression summons Shonen Bat in order to deliver her from the harsh reality of her husband drifting away from her. But Ikari's words of courage give her determination to live on and fight. That these escapes from reality only offer temporary salvation and are just an excuse to look at ourselves as victims, when we are anything but it. The episode shows Shonen Bat is as powerful as we make it to be. Although later on, he does grow so big as to engulf the entire city of Tokyo, much like the bomb. But he could be beaten through willpower.
Your existence itself is a deception. Yes, deluding people with temporary peace of mind.
Paranoia Agent is dark and mysterious. It brings out the fear that plagues people and shows human nature through its mischievous and primitive desires. Fear can be a byproduct of this very world we live in, passed down to us, and it makes us feel trapped, paralyzed in the face of choices. At least that's what the show tells us. But it also brings hope. Much like history, it tells us that in order to get rid of our guilt and fears, we have to acknowledge our own history. Distancing away from the past mistakes of our own kind will only make us question our identity. Only once we accept ourselves will we be able to let go of the past. In the previously mentioned apology in the Kono statement, he states, "We shall face squarely with the historical facts instead of evading them and take them to heart as lessons of history. We hereby reiterate our firm determination never to repeat the same mistake by forever engraving such issues in our memories through the study and teaching of history." The anxiety of living in a society never does go away. There will still be gossips, blame games, avoidance. Perhaps that is what is intended by Kon, that the world will always give us occasions where we are tempted to choose between accepting reality or living in an illusion. As long as we acknowledge the baggage of our past, Kon claims there will be hope for happiness, for clarity. We often tend to find an escape from reality in art. Rarely does art then mimic our reality and show us our faults. The way Paranoia Agent brings out this hope amidst its darker themes and surreal plot is something to experience for oneself. And that is why you should watch Paranoia Agent. This video was a culmination of weeks of work, and it makes me really happy you reached the end. I want to keep trying new things, and pushing myself and your support would mean a lot to me. Please like the video and comment down below to tell me stuff. You can find me on Twitter and reach to me about your own thoughts about the videos I make. If you enjoyed the video, please do subscribe to the second act. I'll see you here in the next video. Okay, bye.